The first alone experience I had with Srila Prabhupada was in Seattle. At the time, after I finished decorating the temple, he came up. It was a glorious success. And we found a horrible, they'd found a bad place for him. He didn't like it. And Jayananda and Govindadasi and I went out in the middle of the night, in the middle of a fog, and were driving wildly around chanting and praying for a place for Prabhupada. We were driving up, I think, on Capitol Hill, and all of a sudden, in this dense fog, where we could not even see the road, a sign emerged that said, "For rent." And we said, that's what we were chanting, that's what happened. And so not one of us looked like the sort of person you'd rent to, because we all had shaved heads, and Vandadasi was wearing so here Jayananda, who always looks pretty much like a ordinary, Joe, he got out of the truck with without his short hair and wearing his karmi clothes, went and rented the place. It was gorgeous. When we finally saw what it was like in the morning, it was a garden apartment with like windows, and when you looked out, you were looking into the flower beds, because most of the room was under the ground, and it was half a way out of the ground, so you could actually see beautiful lawns and flowers and stuff. And Prabhupada loved it. So in that room, Harsharani and Govindadasi were his servants, and he was living there. And I happened to come over for some reason or another, and we were all sitting in Prabhupada's room. Oh yes, Srila Prabhupada was talking to me about the possibility of going to New Vrindavan and building dioramas. He wanted to start a museum, fate museum type thing in New Vrindavan at that time. So he and I and another devotee were there, and then somehow or other, and I'm never quite sure how it happened, he and I ended up alone in the room. And it was Srila Prabhupada's room. He always had a coffee table, which he used as a desk, because he liked to sit on the floor. And he had an armoire next to it, a steel cabinet, such as he used to have in India, and in it he used to keep his correspondence and books and things like that. And Srila Prabhupada was behind the desk, and he was showing me, incidentally to doing something else, how he would open up an envelope with a letter opener, and then use the envelope for his reply, and then to save paper, and for his first draft, and then he'd draft it out again onto the letter when he had it down the way he wanted it. And somehow he had asked me to do something, and in the end, I ended up behind his desk, and he ended up on the other side. I was so on my toes and alarmed by the experience of being alone with Prabhupada. It was just like being with Queen Elizabeth or Indra or something of that sort, all alone. And you say, "Oh my God, what am I going to do now? I have no instruction. I don't even know what to say," because I wasn't just initiated. And I had, been a part of the Hridayashri. I was still sort of psychedelicizing a little bit. And Srila Prabhupada was standing there, and I'm sitting there totally mortified, wringing my hands and squirming my toes and wondering what to do next, and not wanting to leave by any means, but not knowing what to do if I stayed. And Srila Prabhupada looked at me and said, "We should always be considering what is my duty," he said. And I'm thinking, duty, okay. And I've been hearing impaired since I was young, and I didn't know that. And it's only the last few years I got hearing aids. So I didn't have any hearing aids. So what to speak of Prabhupada's accent and my inability to hear, I was having a hard time understanding, plus the psychedelics residually floating around in my brain cells. So Prabhupada points at this coffee table and says, "Do you see this ant?" And I've been looking very carefully, and I know Srila Prabhupada is the external representative of Supersoul, that when Prabhupada says there's an ant, there's an ant. And I looked at the table, and there was no ant there. And I said, "Do you see that ant?" And I didn't know what he meant. I said, "There's no ant." And I said, sort of like yes and no combined. Because I didn't want to say no and appear stupid to not see the spiritual or whatever ant was there. And I didn't want to say yes and be proven a liar because I couldn't see the ant and I didn't know where it would be found. So then Srila Prabhupada looked at me intensely as though that the ant issue now being solved, he wanted to get on to real business, and he said, "My duty," he said, "is to, my job," he said, "is to understand what is my duty to this ant." I said, "Oh no." I said, "Not only there's an ant that I can't see, but now I have a duty to it." I said, "What am I going to do?" He said, "Somehow," Prabhupada looked at me beseechingly almost, "somehow I have to help this ant." He said, "And maybe I can chant." And he said, reaches down, he says, "Maybe I can chant Hare Krishna." Or he went like this, "Feed it a little prasadam." He said, if we can help one ant become Krishna conscious, then our whole movement is a glorious success. And then I realized it was a pure metaphor, that Prabhupada was aware of my bewilderment is pretty obvious. That he used it to make a point was excellent. And there I was, instructed by the invisible ant to whom I had a duty to feed and to chant, and that if I did so, it was our movement, whole movement was a success.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,